So what I want to talk about today is I do want to look back. I want to give some of you who have a more recent history some idea of what took place before PPRC. There actually was pollution prevention before. PPRC has done a great job of bringing it to the stage, but I didn't really want to dwell on that so much. And what I'm going to do is spend some time today talking about the now and where you can take this in the future. I know a lot of people in the business are a little bit worried or nervous as to where this is all going. And I'm going to try to give you some idea of where you can take it based on what's going on now outside of the field that you're practicing in right now. So what I'll do is I'm just going to I'll cover these 5 things in each one. Sort of a view of the early days. I think I get it down to about 2 slides. What our knowledge is today and how that knowledge affects you. I'm going to give you a little bit of a primer on something called risk management, and believe me, it's not what you think it is, but it's been around for a long time. And then I'll talk a little bit about environmental management systems, as my good friend Cam would always say. Little to do with the environment, but it's really how do you embed this into what people do every day and not make it separate. So we're going to talk a lot about separateness and how destructive that is in any organization of any size. And then I'll talk about sort of what's next. So I want to talk about the early days. And this sort of led up to what I always never liked, and I called it the traditional approach to pollution prevention. And it was sort of this, was done initially by Jacobs engineers in the 1988 thing, 39 mind-numbing pages of checklists. And everybody thought that was great. I mean, the engineers thought this was great. God, 39 pages of checklists. I've died and gone to heaven. I hated every single one of them. So when the beige manual came out, they had cut it down to, I believe, about 10 pages of checklist. But it was a very stilted way of looking at it. We're going to look at all of the options here, and we're going to do a feasibility study, and we're going to decide what we'll do. And you never had enough data. You always picked what you wanted to pick. I said, why did you bother to go through the feasibility study on that sort of thing? And so that sort of led up, and I'm going to tell you where this has all gone from there. And engineers will still do the same thing, but you really need to make pollution prevention, any sort of improvement, part of the organization. It's not about eliminating waste. It's not about using less water. It's about helping the organization meet its objectives, its business objectives. And it's about families meeting their objectives. Every family, which is a base organization I work with in my course, about fire stations. It's about ballparks. It's about all of these things. It's not just about companies. When I teach my course, it's really, the students think that sustainability is all about business. And it isn't. It's really about organizations. And it really affects all kinds of organizations, including government agencies and everybody. So it's all about organizations. I hope I'm going to make that point today. But so in these early days, I go back pretty far, And, let's take a look at pollution here. These animals are very large. And we actually have in Massachusetts, we have a great collection of great white sharks. They're going around 14, 15, 16 feet. I think one got caught at 18 feet. And they have a cafeteria there. There's a lot of seals there. And the great whites come from all over the world to feed on the seals. And the seals are funny because they don't like to be eaten by the great white. And so what they've done is they've come into the harbors. And Cape Cod, where this is mostly septic tanks, still to this day. And of course, they were polluting the harbor with nitrogen, which is the nutrients that saltwater organisms really like. And you follow a seal, and I have done this just below the dam at the Elliott Lake. I used to stay at the Silver Cloud. That was my home. The Silver Cloud over at Elliott Lake, and when the seals would come in, the fishermen always hated that because they ate a lot of the fish that were migrating up through there. And then every now and then an orca would come in and suck down a couple of the seals, and everybody would be cheering because the seals were, eating all the fish. and that sort of stuff. But these animals, they were pretty much like Canadian geese. They would be eating and then leaving a trail behind them. So there was probably a good amount of nutrients, a good amount of water pollution. There's a little volcano up there, and I was around at the time that the volcano went off at Mount St. Helens, and downstream of that, and talking to people about when they would take a glass up, there would be a ring of dust around there on the table, and how it got in their food, how it got in their clothes, and things like that. So there's a lot of pollution that comes from volcanoes, and so pollution goes way back. I don't go back quite that far. But. So in the beginning, actually, one of the two biggest days of my life that really changed it was I participated in the first Earth Day. It was in 1970. I'll date myself. I was a senior in college. I was at Rutgers University trying to decide what I wanted to do in my life. That day, first Earth Day was the largest Earth Day ever. No Earth Day after the first one has touched it in terms of size and impact. And I was there, and it changed my whole life. And I had one other sort of moment like that. In 1992, I really wanted to go to Rio for the Earth Summit. After having read all of the work that's been written up that, I didn't make it, but I did go to Rio +5, which was in the Earth Summit +5 in Rio. And that's what really, I started making my transition to sustainability in 1992. Then there was a thing called the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And many of us in the early days got into pollution prevention through this wonderful piece of legislation passed in 1976. And wow, it was going to cost companies a lot of money. And the company said that it will end industry in the economy of the United States. The economy of the United States is going to go down the tube. All the industries are going to close down. Everybody's going to be laid off. We're going to have a depression. Of course, that comes up with every single piece of major legislation. And it's things like pollution prevention that they could turn it into an opportunity. We're going to talk a lot about opportunities today. Opportunities are very important. So it did anything but that. I had a PhD in chemistry. And chemistry is an interesting field because we can predict everything in chemistry. We have thermodynamics, and I can predict whether any reaction is going to take place. But some reactions take place very slowly. So we have kinetics, and it's the speed of reaction. So between thermodynamics and kinetics, we can predict everything, which is sort of neat. But after the first Earth Day, what I figured out back in those days, and I think you all know this now, I can't predict what any of you will do from one moment to the next. Human beings are totally unpredictable. And that sounds like a lot of fun. There's no thermodynamics to human beings. There's no kinetics. They can take off and be insulting in one moment and be hugging you in the next moment, so which is sort of a good thing. So, and pollution prevention was really that. I met the nicest people in my whole life. This has been a field that's attracted some of the nicest human beings on the face of the earth, a good number of them here in the room that I go way back with and consider them friends, although I don't get to see them that often anymore. And so that happened. So I ran a lab. That's really all they could have a PhD in chemistry do. It was an environmental lab. It was in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I analyzed stuff, and I ended up discovering 38 Superfund sites in New England. The water tasted bad. There was a submission, water had a funny smell, funny odor. There were 38 Superfund sites. And I said, I really want to work on these sites. I really want to be a part of it. At the chemistry, and I work with engineers. The engineers don't always, even the chemical engineers, they'll dispute me on this, but they're in pumps and flow and stuff like that. And I understood chemistry pretty well. It's all about chemistry. So chemistry's really helped me. I can pronounce the names of all those chemicals. I actually know what they do. I can do stuff with them, and that's always been very helpful. And so I quit the lab in 1980, and I went to work for a company called Roy F. Weston, which has gone on to be Weston. So it was about 900 people. It was probably the largest environmental engineering firm in the United States at the time. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and they handed me the first regulations that came out of RCRA. They came out in 1980. So I'm probably the first person in the United States of America who did this full time. I did hazardous waste. And all the clients really hated that because it was going to cost them a lot of money. And you know, I actually did my first pollution prevention job in 1981. One of my favorite jobs to this day was Titleist golf ball division. And when they paint the balls come down on a tripod, and they go there when you paint them. And my good painting friend over here, you not only paint the golf ball, but you paint the stand that it's on. And after a while, the golf ball will pop down there and it'll stick to the paint, and it won't spin. You won't be able to paint it. But it's pretty simple. You know, they just broke those things off, and you threw it in a big vat of solvent. Methylene chloride. It was a big vat. It was very big. And the guy, most of the time, that was scooping these things out with a little fishing net, didn't wear a shirt. Most of the time. I mean, we didn't, back in those days, you know, we didn't have a lot of good, effective health and safety that we have these days. And just by, one of the things I've always done is, and some pollution prevention people do it well, others really read the success stories, and they go into a company already knowing what they're going to do, whether the company wants, and that's an extreme, I know it's an extreme, but that still happens. I would go in and talk to the employees. They really knew what was going on. And I get friendly with the employees, and I would say, please, please, help me understand what you're doing. Help me. I need to understand this. And man, they would all come in and help you. And you know, getting friendly, I actually, over the years, have done a lot of work for Baxter Healthcare. And I asked them for their best plant in the world, and I asked them for their worst plant in the world, because they were about ready to implement lean at that time, and I was sort of going out and doing some of the early scouting for this. So they put me in Ay Bonito, Puerto Rico, which is the highest elevation town in Puerto Rico. It's up in the mountains. It's, I love that town. You know, it's so hot in San Juan, and sweating and sweating and sweating, and then you get up there, it's like the air conditioning turn on, it's like 70 degrees year round. It's just a beautiful town up there. So they flew me in on a Sunday, and Monday morning I'm in there, and I got my first taste of a macho society. All of the workers in there were women. All the supervisors were men. The next level up, you had women and men, but the women from the bottom never made it up there. They would have to go somewhere else to do that. So hundreds and hundreds of women. So I get there with the general manager, and he tells me, he says, "You have a real tough job. I want you to know that we're the best. We're the best at Baxter." And Edwin. And you will not find anything because we've picked all the low-hanging fruit. And good luck to you. Thank you, Edwin. That's great. So I went out, and I was in an area, and the women were coming in from the weekend. And they hadn't seen each other all weekend. And there were tears in their eyes. "I haven't seen you all weekend." They're hugging and they're kissing each other, and I'm standing there with my gown on, my cap and stuff like that. So I said, "So what about me?" And Bob likes to be hugged. So they got in a line, and every one of them hugged me. And the people from Baxter are going, "Oh God, no. What's going on here?" So that was good. I thought, well, that's over with. And I'd be walking down the hallway, and there'd be these big glassed-in areas. So they made intravenous bags there, IV bags. And so it was all sterile and that sort of stuff. And there'd be a woman in there, and she'd be going, whoa. So I'd go suit up, go in and get hugged by everybody in there. And by about Wednesday, I've been hugged at least once by every woman in the plant. The people from Illinois are going, "Oh God." But what worked is when I went in and asked them, you know, what was bothering them and what they wanted to change, they all actually knew what it was and had a solution. And the funny thing is when I saw the solution, you say, "Oh my God." And then I would look at them and I would say, "You've tried this before, haven't you?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "And you know it works?" And they said, "We wouldn't have told you if it didn't work." And so I came up at the end of the week, and of course I had to go through all the hugs and kisses again on Friday as they all went home in tears that they're not going to see their friends for the whole weekend because it's very family oriented, and They live in different parts. I went in to Edwin again. And he's a very, very powerful man. Actually went on to become the head of operations for Baxter in the Asia Pacific area. Actually a great guy, really good staff. And I came up with 40 things. I limited it down to 40 things that they could do. But I told them they could only do no more than 12. I suggested 8 to 11. If you have less than 7 things, it's not really a program. And if you have more than 12, you can't keep in touch with them. That's pretty well-known statistics. And he said, I'm going to do all 40. And I said, no, Edwin, you can't do all 40. You know, you're going to be limited down to 11 because we had the lean teams were coming in. They were actually going to look at some of those as well. And you know, he got very insistent, and I took a big chance. And I looked at him and said, Edwin, are you the same person that stood here on Monday morning and told me that I wouldn't find anything? And you could hear a pin drop in the room. Very, very powerful person. It was a big chance. And he smiled and said, yeah, it was a pretty dumb statement, wasn't it? And you know, he went on and did good things, but he really was behind this program. And that's what a lot of you do, is trying to get the right people in an organization to be behind these programs. He really supported it, brought it to the Asia Pacific. So that's pretty much how I worked. I talked to employees all over the place, in different places. I always had a little bit of trouble when I was a little bit east of the Cascade Mountains. I have a tendency to be, I'm fiscally conservative, but I'm from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm pretty liberal on the other thing, and you sort of have to be careful what you say over there. I remember being in Dufur, Oregon one time, and the people were staring at me. And so the guy I was working with at Goldendale Aluminum, when they were around, said, I said, Jim, they're staring at me. And he says, yes, Bob. They probably think you're from Portland. They hate people from Portland. And I says, well, you know, what would happen if they found out I was from Boston, Massachusetts? And he says, they haven't figured that out, Bob. He says, there's only one tree in town, and you'd be hanging from it. You know? And it's not quite true. I mean, I did learn that you don't order a porter there for a beer. I mean, they had 2 beers, Bud and Bud Light, with the American flag up there. And so, yeah, I mean, and this is what makes the world go. And in Imnaha, and did a lot of work out in Meade, Washington, in the Spokane area for aluminum, the old Kaiser primary aluminum plant out there. So that's what I did, and that's how I worked. The book Quality is Free was really a big time. Crosby came out with this, and actually Intel was actually one of the leaders in this time. Intel demanded of their supply chain that every year they increase the amount of quality, and they measured it. And they wanted all the companies to decrease the cost of sending that product to them. And that's the whole concept of quality is free. Pollution prevention is free as well, too. You invest in it in front, and it's supposed to save you money on the other side. But what Intel did that was different than anybody else, that they actually went in and helped their supply chain meet those goals. Because it was good for Intel, it was good for them, and you know, we get a lot of chains, a lot of big companies like Walmart now that don't do that. You either do it or we drop you. And they're really proud in the fact sometimes that they have somebody in waiting, that in 6 minutes later they can bring another chain. And they sometimes rub it in a little bit. So Intel's always been a great leader, and John, I actually was friends with his boss at one time, and great way to do it. So that was I actually did a Waste Min conference in Boston. I had 40 speakers in late 1981. Had about 100 people there because it was going to save people money. I got laid off a lot. Over the years, and I remember one. It was the old Garrity and Miller, which became the Arcadis now, and they had won 2 the Title V air operating permit applications, about $250,000 apiece, to do those volumes and all that stuff. And one of them I remember well was the Dana Corporation. I did a lot of work with them. For $3,000, I went in, and they had 75 tons a year of emissions of perchloroethylene. They made piston rings in there, and they all had to take all the stuff off. They dipped them in that, and I went in and I eliminated 75 tons for $3,000, and I got laid off about a week later. They didn't want to give me the chance to lose their second job. So pollution prevention hasn't always been popular in some of the engineering fields and that sort of stuff. So the RCRA amendments came in 1984. It took a very tough law, made it more difficult, more pollution prevention. Michael Porter, in his seminal work, Competitive Advantage, came out in 1985, and he said, it doesn't matter what sector you're working in. It's all about the process map. He coined in that book the term value chain, and there are two value chains. There's a value chain inside the company, and there's a value chain on the customer side and on the supply side as well. So, but basically, he poo-pooed everything that anybody would say about sector. It doesn't matter. Everybody's got a process. You figure out what the process is. They all have people. You figure out what the people do, and you make everything's based on the organization. That's going to be my key point today. So then we had the second wave. 1987, I published my first article on waste minimization. The Journal of the American Institute for Plant Engineers. It was early in the year. A couple months later, a guy named Joel Hirschhorn, we were probably the only two names in the field at that time, worked for one of the congressional investigation groups and did a thing on From Pollution to Prevention, a progress report on waste reduction. So Joel and I, spend a lot of time together. 1988 is when the Jacobs Engineering, the Purple Manual, the Waste Minimization Opportunity Assessment Manual. Harry Freeman from EPA, who's done some books on waste minimization early in the game. And then I would say in 1988 is when pollution prevention was born. I came to Region 5. There was a woman named Claire Rowlett at the time, and Claire Bronson, and I had Lynn Halberth from Washington. I had a guy named David Wigglesworth from Alaska, Marianne Fitzgerald from Oregon, yes, and over here, yes, and then Katie Sewell, right, from Idaho. Yeah. And quite a bit of women in there, and of course I wanted to meet them too. I did get my hugs, but I wanted to meet them, but they wanted to go shopping. Because we're in Seattle, and there's actually big stores here in Seattle, and Boise didn't have the big stores, Anchorage didn't have the big stores, so I lost them all to shopping. It was not one of my favorite activities. But this was sort of the beginning. I remember Bill Ross actually at that conference I was at, and I can remember the governor was supposed to show up, and the governor did not show up. And the person that was supposed to back the governor did not show up. So my first thing of Bill Ross decided to go up and give the talk, and he pretended he was the governor. And it was very funny when you know Bill, and he said, if I were the governor, I would do this. It was just the opposite of what that governor would have done and at the time, and so we always had a good time in this field, and then I started making a lot of trips out here, paper mills, the two cement plants that were here, and so I've spent a lot of time around here over the years, and just it's been like a home to me. Great to come back. I want to switch from that. I want to talk about what I do today, and because I bring a very strong interest and passion about pollution prevention with me, and the world's changing, and I've spent a whole career trying to do these things, and independent of me, they're all now happening at the same time. And I'm getting near the end of my career, and I really want to go out with a swinging, as they say. We had a baseball player in Boston after the curse of the Bambino, after losing Babe. Name was Ted Williams, and he was a great baseball player. And he hit a home run his first time at bat. And he hit a home run his last time at bat. And it was really, they didn't sit him down. It really was his last time at bat. And so this stuff that I'm going to show you, just briefly show you today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it in the training session today. So I'm going to show you how process mapping is used to do this kind of stuff. It's going to change everything you do. And I want you to know about it. I'm going to work with PPRC to make sure you get a lot of information on it. But it's about what's called risk-based thinking. And that's pretty much what I really want to do. And, so our knowledge today. This risk management, again, it isn't what you think it is. I was fortunate. I worked for an Australian company in about the year 2004, 2005, and they're the largest ISO certification company in the world. Let's say a global. They bought QMI in the United States, the largest in the United States and Canada. So that's where I began to learn ISO. Cam was after me all those years to go and learn about ISO. But I learned all about this risk management. And now it's all really coming out in terms of all the ISO standards are being revised. And next year, in 2015, and we already know what it looks like, there's a brand new environmental management system, and it doesn't look anything like it looked like before. And I always say, it's sort of an analogy. You're going to go home tonight, and during the day, we actually moved your house. Your house is in a different spot in the neighborhood. We did a makeover. We rearranged every room. We rearranged all the drawers. And you got home, and number one, you can't find your house, and when you find your house, you can't find anything. And that's the way the environmental management people are feeling right now. You're changing everything. Now, we're not changing everything. We're moving around. And I could tell you what house you live in now. There's fourth house on the right now, not the second house on the left. I could give you a guide to where your socks are, where your clothes are hung and stuff like that. And it'd be a little bit of a pain, but I mean, it'd take you a day or two. You like the makeover, it looks really nice, and things are really in a good place now. It's actually easier to find things now than before. So we got to get over that sort of thing. And there's a lot of complaining going on right now in this field. But the field's really sort of based on this risk-based thinking. And it's really something we've done all the time, but we've never given it a name. Basically, all of you in your homes, for the wage earners in the house, the fact that they could die suddenly is unacceptable to the family. So you buy insurance. You're hedging risk, basically risk. Most of you that drive an automobile, actually, you could total it, and in Massachusetts it's mandatory, but you buy automobile insurance. You buy a lot of insurance at home, so homes do risk-based things, but those are negative risks. We're going to talk a little bit about there are positive risks as well. So we all know about risk, and they have a statement now with the new ISO 31000, what I'll talk about. It's sort of like driving a car without brakes, and it's a good thing because we get these opportunities now that allow us to keep going forward without having to put the brakes on. Risk was always about putting brakes on. It was always about hedging. It was always about insurance, and risk goes way back. It goes back to the ancient Greeks. It actually came into full swing in the 1800s with the trans-world shipment of goods by ships that we wouldn't even want to get on these days. They're so antiquated. And so this whole idea of opportunity is really big, and pollution prevention has always been about opportunity, finding that opportunity and making the opportunity happen. But we're going to be now focused not on eliminating waste, but did the elimination of the waste help the organization meet its objective? So now we're going to be focused more at a slight one level higher, where everything's focused on the organization. So I have to explain risk to people because it's a different definition than they used to. This is the international definition. It goes back to about 1990 in Australia, and they've left one word out here. But basically, it says risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. It used to be an event. But what we found is, we do have events. We have recessions. We have tsunamis and earthquakes. We have explosions. We got corruption. Puts people in jail, senior managers in jail. That's happened a few times. So we have all of these sort of things, and those are events. But what we know, what the Australians have taught us, is that bad decisions bring down more companies than all the events put together. We're really, really good at making bad decisions. And bad decisions mean we just don't have all the information. And actually, these days, we have too much information. We're going to make the decision. We can't read through all this information. We can't go through all of this stuff. We make bad decisions. So the word event's been removed from here. It's still there. You can look at events. And there is a brand new standard. Forgive me, I live with standards. It's ISO 22301. It's a business continuity standard. And basically what they're saying is the event's going to happen. You can't stop it. So what are you going to do the next day? How fast can you recover? And then what they found out that if you're planning for recovery, you can recover in a day, obviously, but you can't afford it. But when you start making those changes to be ready to recover from an earthquake or something like that, you're making your organization stronger. You're more likely to meet your objectives today, even if the event never takes place. And again, that just goes back into the process improvement. So this uncertainty is really, again, it's a state of deficiency of information, and it's related to decision making, so it's a really big thing. Now the next complication here is the effects. They can be positive, or they can be negative. And we all know about the negative ones. Basically, all of you think of risk is somebody getting hurt, and something bad happening, and we got to stop it. We got to stop this bad thing from happening. You can't. It's going to happen. You can try to put things in the way, but bad things happen. But a lot of good things happen too, and that's where a lot of the pollution prevention comes from. So we have these good effects. Sustainability and pollution prevention, people are really good at coming up with good effects. And what they do is they put them in a room, and they go in and have that photograph taken with them, put it in a report, and they write up a nice story about it, and they never use them to offset the negative effects, which you can do. And I'm going to show you actually how that's confounding a lot of risk people because they're not used to dealing with positive things. And it just is wow. So we're going to be dealing with these two positive and negative effects. And so I want to show you sort of the role you'd play. A little bit busy here. But if you look at that negative effect over on the left, that goes to risk assessment. So that's basically failure mode and effect analysis, root cause analysis, structured what ifs. The ISO 31010 has something like, I think, 27 different tools you can use for risk assessment. It's not hard to do risk assessment. A lot of people think you need to be a specialist. We're not talking about scientific risk assessment now. We're talking about a regular risk assessment of do I walk my dog before breakfast, or do I walk my dog after I have breakfast, or something like that. We're talking about those kind of things, decision sort of thing. But if you take that thing with sustainability there, and let's put pollution prevention in there. Let's put sustainability in there because you really are doing sustainability too. What you're really doing is how do I deal with these positive effects? And then moving them down to the risk management, can I offset something that came out of the risk assessment? And can I reduce the uncertainty? Well, I can't stop earthquakes and stuff. I can't stop some of these things, but there's a lot of uncertainty. I can make decision making better. And again, a lot of uncertainties coming from that. And the whole idea is at the end to meet objectives. So I feel as a technical assistance provider and think the first thing you need to know about the organization you go and visit is what's their objective. And then you're going to choose something to deal with that's going to help that company meet its objectives. And that's going to be, I think, the real key theme moving forward. You can't be, one of the definitions of sustainable, and one I hate, means it lasts a long time and misses everything. But basically, if organizations do not meet their objectives, they go away. So meeting objectives, and now we're going to have responsibly set objectives, right? We can't just make $1 gazillion, then lay everyone off and go and spend our money for the rest of life. That's not really socially responsible at all. But once the objectives are good ones, you actually now can influence them in the work you're doing, and you have, sometimes without knowing it paying a lot of attention to it. That brings me to my next point. Let's talk a little bit about risk management. It's ISO 31000. It's a guidance document. It's an interesting document because it was AS 4360, an Australian document, that I became familiar with the 2004 version of it. And you know, it's very simple, 20 pages. It's not a management system. It's a guidance document. They've got the word system on it, not a lot of stuff. But it's a guidance document. So, and it just has three things in it. It's got a set of principles, it's got a framework, and it's got a process. What could be simpler than that? I just wish I could spend all day on this slide. These are the 11 principles. They're mandatory. You actually have to demonstrate that you're doing all 11 of them. You have to know where they are, and then you have to go audit the fact that you're doing them. This is for a family, and this is for a elementary school. It's for a fire station. It's for a hospital. These are all organizations. You have to have these principles. And so the first one, I like the top ones. You are absolutely under no circumstances allowed to do anything whatsoever in risk management unless you can demonstrate it adds value. Wow, isn't that cool? Wow. And that they define what value is. And they spend a lot of time in the guidance documents explaining, giving effect to the principles. So you can't just have these principles hanging up on the wall, which a lot of people do. You have to prove that you've given effect to them, and you have to do all 11. And that's what comes to the one just under that, is tailored to the need of each organization. The nice thing about the new ISO standards is they're required by ISO to be understandable to a micro business. The United States of America defines a micro business as 10 people or less. Some countries in the world define it as 5 people or less. And if it's not understandable and usable to a micro business, you can't do it, period. End of game. Start over again. So, and they've done a pretty good job with that. There's still a couple of little technical terms in there, here and there, but we got glossaries. And the big thing I've learned about risk, going into it, I thought it'd be easy to make the transition there because pollution prevention has its own jargon and environmental management systems do, and risk has theirs. And no one understands what sustainability is, they say. But if you define it from the point of an organization, you can clearly articulate what it is. And no one can refute you, and it makes them angry because there's an article once a week on LinkedIn groups on the sustainability dead. I think there's been some on pollution prevention dead. Nah, they're not dead. You know, they're still very active and maybe need to be refocused at time. The next one at the top, the middle, is an integral part of organizational processes. That's an anti-silo thing, is you're not allowed to do anything unless everybody does it all the time. So the key thing is making it part of the work instructions. From sustainability, it kills the concept of green teams. Because green teams are always separate from the rest of the organization. Out having fun, hugging each other, picking up litter. The sustainability people go around these big chemical plants. And they go in the cafeteria and say, "You're not composting here in the cafeteria." And, okay, well, that's great. And, you know, it's a good value. I really have no problem with it, but it's something you'll do on the side. What they really should be doing is looking at how can people do their jobs differently to be more sustainable and help the company meet its objectives. So the key thing is you do nothing that is not part of what people do every day. So you learn about work instructions. You learn about operational controls. And that's in the management system. Those parts are not going away. And then number 3 at the top, on the right-hand side, is it's got to be part of decision making. So what this says, in essence, is that you cannot make decisions at any level in the company by any person unless they're part of the same framework. So, and that's the framework. We create a decision-making framework. So, and again, my good friends in the sustainability field, they have their own objectives. They have their own report. They make their own decisions. They are so far removed from the mainstream of the organization. It's a shame. And they could be so much more effective if they could just, and this is easy to do. You just have to go talk to the employees again. Talk to the employees and have them tell you how you should be doing it. That's what I told Edwin at the end. You need to talk to your employees more often. Very, very good group of people there. So, and we can go through these, you got human and cultural. The thing that these principles do to sustainability people is it drives them nuts. Because if you have 300 facilities around the world, I was doing some work for BP upstream, following 57 operations in 26 different countries, anywhere from a drill rig in the Gulf of Mexico to the first puncture of the ground with a test well, maybe in the Arctic somewhere. And they're all different. And corporations never treat their facilities as being different. They have top down. You will do it our way. This is how we do risk. You will do it this way. And now we find out, oh my God, they're all different. This is anarchy. But I can put them all on the same risk management framework. And now I'm going to show you all of the management systems have exactly the same numbering system. And there's a written procedure on how to take the decision framework and embed it into the management system framework. It's all in writing. Australians have known this since 1990. So these are really pretty good, and there's a lot being written about them. And they're, if you actually go and Google ISO 31000 in plain English, there's a guy up in Calgary who has permission to put this up there, and he has actually these principles on there. And I would write them down, memorize them, because these principles work no matter what you do. And you have to do every one of them. But they're going to be tailored to different organizations. We'll put different emphasis in them. But in your family, so bring these home at night, put them up on the wall, and whether you're family or roommates and things like that, this is how we're going to live now. We're going to follow these principles, and that's going to be a big part. We got a framework. The framework's Plan, Do, Check, Act. Pretty simple stuff, and we're going to do everything in Plan, Do, Check, Act. That's pretty much what management systems do. But the next part is this risk management process. And this risk management process says, and we'll get into a couple minutes, is that you're not allowed to do risk assessment unless you put it in the proper context. Because what's a risk here might not be a risk somewhere else. What's a risk in one business might not be a risk somewhere else. What's a risk in one department might not be a risk in something else. So you got to do context. Everything in context we're going to learn. And notice the thing on the left-hand side. You have to do everything with stakeholders. You're absolutely not allowed under any circumstance whatsoever to do any risk assessment unless you have stakeholders involved. Because they see risk differently than you do. As a matter of fact, you should have some employees involved. And the risks in Singapore will be different than the risks in Shanghai, and different than the risk in Sao Paulo, or anywhere. And that's okay. And because that's a cultural part, we go up there. So those principles really give us a sense of bearing in here. So this is how risk is done. Risk is not, you can see the risk assessment is in, then we treat the risk at the end. So that's why risk management is a little confusing, because when we treat risk, we're really managing it, but it's part of risk assessment. So you have to learn the vocabulary of these and use them. So now I want to, so what is all this doing now? There's all this risk stuff, this risk-based thing. What is it going to do to the environmental management system? And we're anxiously awaiting the 2005 version, which will be out on time. Many of us have followed. These standards go into CD1 and CD2, the committee drafts. Then it goes to a DIS, which is the first voting. The DIS, I think, it's just about ended for 14,001. They'll deliberate on it. They'll do an FDIS, which will be a final vote, and then they'll issue the standard. It will be done on time. You have exactly 3 years to certify to the new standard. You can't do it in 3 years, not possible. It's changed so much. So they're actually warned companies to start doing it now. Most companies don't even know about it. If you go to the websites of any of the 50 registrars here in the United States, you wouldn't believe that any of these things are actually happening. OSAS 18,001 is dead. They signed the death warrant for that. But I go on the British Standards site, and they're still selling copies of it. They're still certifying companies to it now. It's going away. There's going to be a brand new ISO 45001. That's it's going to come out in the year 2016, and it's going to be in the same format, risk-based format as these. So we really know a lot about these now. Embrace them. They're really much of what you've been doing over the years, and I think you can use them to help the organizations with their objectives. So the way ISO 31000 works, and I don't like to use that term because a lot of people, you mention the word ISO and they go berserk right away. They just tune you right out. We don't do that. We don't do that stuff. Spare me the ISO stuff. I don't want to do that stuff. And yeah, I mean, they're just a bunch of standards, and they're really not that restrictive. I mean, you really have a lot of wiggle room in there, and this gives you. So if we see this risk as sort of the top level thing, sort of the high level way we think now with the principles, the framework, and the processes. Below it are ethics. I don't know if any of you have had to go through an ethical trading initiative audit. They're called, the group called CEDX, and they have a SMETA audit. SMETA audit is about 110 pages of stuff. The auditor comes in, and they're looking at how do you discipline your workers. So I think 9 of the 11 things they look at are HR things, and the HR people have not been involved in these things. And of course, that's very cultural. I work for a company in Wisconsin, and that company, the discipline of the workers is done at the discretion of their supervisor. That's against every international principle in the world. Supervisors are not allowed to discipline because bad things happen sometimes, in other countries when they discipline. But in 39 years, there's not been a single complaint by any employee. And I told them if they moved to Madison, because I've been told by somebody up in Appleton at a paper mill that every loony in the state of Wisconsin lives in Madison, the one liberal town in the entire state. They would be put out of business in 15 minutes. I think if they moved to San Francisco, they'd be put out of business in 5 minutes for that discipline thing. But it was culturally okay, and they got through the audit. So there's a lot of these audits are going on, the food companies especially. So if you make anything for Nestle, what these in apparel too. Basically what they're testing is, are you following the supplier code of conduct that the company has? And most companies, they're all filed away. They come in attached to the purchase order, they sign the purchase order, and sometimes it's 36 font, that the moment you sign this, you are agreeing to our terms. The Gap is great for that. The Gap has a wonderful, I think it's one of the best, supplier code of conduct. And there's no evidence that anybody's ever come up with a single factory that makes anything for the Gap knows what that is. They file it away. At this company, they made for 260 food companies. I had to hire an intern for several weeks to go through the files and find out how many did they have, how many were required for signature and stuff like that. So we have this. It's becoming what Walt Disney uses it now. So if you make anything that goes into any Walt Disney product, you're subject to a SMETA audit. And now we can do some of these under these things. The middle one is operations. I do. And the BP has this beautiful, it's their operating management system. So again, Google, BP, operating management system. And they have this pie. It's beautiful. It's got that green and yellow wrap around it. And I told them, you could take this, you put a frame around it, and you could put it in the Louvre. Sunday morning, it's free in Paris and Louvre, and people go to see the Mona Lisa. I think one of the second biggest disappointment of my life. Little tiny thing with the glasses this thick, you can't even see the darn thing. And I could put this next to the Mona Lisa. Everyone would go and see this. But it had 48 slices of the pie. Chemical engineers, they're great, right? 48 slices. So I asked the question. I said, so can I take any 2 of these 48 slices? Very proud of that, 48 slices. And can I compare them data-wise? No. They have 48 frozen silos. And sustainability is not on there. It's so remote from the rest of the operation. They didn't even make the 48. And I said, well, what I could do is I could magnetize this circle. And you can't see magnetism, right? It's invisible. And when no one's looking, I can slap a metal box on the back. Software as a service. And I can go in there and I can gather all the data, and I can have people talk to each other for the first time. Now, I promised them that I would not destroy any silos. I would not harm a silo. You've seen the movies with the animals in it, and the PETA has up there that no animal was harmed in the filming of this movie. I promise you I will not hurt any of the silos. But I teach too, I teach at Harvard, and we have students, and students will never come to a meeting unless you serve food. If there's food, the students will be there, and beer and food, maybe. And if there's not, the students won't come. And so for disciplines, basically what you do is you give them data, they come together, but you don't have to hurt them, but they start really actually corresponding with one another. And I think that's what these systems are actually going to do. And then we got the internal stakeholders down below. So here it is. Every single management system has 10 rows. And those are the 10 rows. And they really starts at number 4, so you have to determine the context, the internal and external context of your operation. So if you're in EPA Region 10, you do the context for EPA Region 10 building. You're in Region 5, you do for the Region 5 building. And they're going to be different, believe me, they are different, actually. And you use a tool called PESTLE. So any of you that have gone to business school, that's sort of the political, economic, and all that stuff. It looks like a SWOT diagram, but it's got PESTLE in it. And then you do a SWOT on each one, because we're looking at opportunities and threats. There's no such thing, really, in sustainability as opportunity and risk. That's an investment term. People like to be cute. They like to use it. Hey, if we use financial terms, people are going to like us. So they got this term called materiality. So any of you that do sustainability reporting and the G4, GRI, we got materiality. There's no such thing as material. It's a financial term, I'm sorry. And if I hold a materiality map up and I hold a risk map up, they're the same thing, same axes, same thing. It's basically risk, but they didn't want to call it risk. We're going to scare people away. They like materiality because it's a financial term, and we're going to help the finance. No, you're not going to help the finance. You're going to help the organization meet its objectives. And actually, one of them might be financial, but if it's responsibly set. So this is so cool. And I'm actually going to walk you through the risk-based thinking in the next slide. So if I could see this as sort of the steps that we're going in. The first thing you're going to do is, now you're a pollution prevention provider, you've been asked to go out to a company, or you're in a company. First thing you do is figure out, so what are the objectives? Website, you can talk to them about it. Some people know and some people don't know. The objectives aren't always sort of out there. Every family has objectives, but they sometimes don't articulate them very well. Police departments have objectives. People have objectives, and what you do is you cascade them. So the board has a set of objectives, and the senior leadership has objectives, but their objectives have to help the board meet its objectives. And then you got your functional managers, and their objectives have to help the senior leadership meet theirs, which has to help the board meet. All the objectives have to be connected. So it's systems thinking. You got to sort of follow these trails up and down. And you're not allowed to have an objective that doesn't help cascade up to the objective. So we do process mapping actually for our objectives in the organization. So then I come down, we're going to determine the internal and external context of every organization using PESTLE and SWOT. We can use force field analysis. We can use the Porter the 5 S's. But we're really trying to get a sense of how does this fit into the organization. Then we're going to sort of identify what we're really going to do is we're going to state everything as a risk now, positive and negative. And we're going to do risk assessment. So materiality will go away, hopefully soon, and we're going to do a risk assessment. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And it's not hard, by the way. You don't need a PhD. You don't have to be a statistician. You don't have to be an ecological whiz to do risk assessment. Sorry. And then we're going to go down and we're going to look for opportunities and threats. We're going to then articulate the context in the risk assessment. That's the second context. So every problem has its own context. And then we're going to prepare a risk map. So we go back and we'll use this diagram again. This is great. We're going to determine the significance using the process, it's called. Yeah. And then This is the thing that really gets me. Everybody knows how to put threats in there. You notice the red in the upper corner there? Those are the threats. Those are things you don't want to happen that can bring the organization down. I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to put the opportunities on the other side. And so I get the best opportunities in the green next to the red, and now allows me to see them side by side, and I can now start balancing them off in terms of being risk neutral. Really cool. This is the only copy of this thing. I mean, it's just common sense, but people are still trying to figure out what we do with these opportunities. In a risk register, they don't know how to put opportunities in. And I said, have you ever heard of double ledger accounting? Where you put in debits and credits, and these people are their accountants. And they don't know how to put the positive in there. So then we have we come up with our action plans, and we get down, we're going to evaluate the performance, we're going to improve the process, we're going to report it out to the stakeholders, we're going to be transparent, we're going to be accountable. The way we're going to manage the organization is, on the left, you're going to have something like the organizational definition of pollution prevention, sustainability, whatever you want to do, your objectives. You're going to go through, work on this uncertainty, both on the operational side, on the management side, and then you're going to meet your objectives on the other side. So what's next? Basically, it's really getting into the institutionalization of this kind of work. This risk-based thinking is going to provide a structured, some people don't like, I never like structure, but it's not bad to have it every now and then. It really gets you out of a lot of trouble. A structured, credible foundation for a discussion around P2 as a means of an organization to meet its objectives. So now it's not a matter of eliminating waste, using less water, doing all that stuff. It's a way the organization will become sustainable in time. Enables P2 to be part of what every employee does every day. It's not pollution prevention unless everybody's doing it. I find workers are very risk adverse. When they go home at night, they don't like to think about work. They always ask me that. They look at me and they say, do you think about work at night? Yes, I do. I love my work. I think about work every night. I actually think about work on the weekend. And they look at me in utter disgust. And they says, we don't. But if somebody got hurt that day, they think about work at night. Somebody got laid off that day, they think about work at night. They hate thinking about work at night. So this is really a way to, I tell them if you do everything that's in the management system, you do everything in the operation and control, you won't have to think about work tonight. I don't believe in change management, except maybe in some institutional. I just tell people, if you do this as part of your job, you don't have to think about work tonight, and they all do it. I don't need any change management on that. It builds on what's already in place. Using the guidance, and the case for P2 is rooted in the giving effect to principles, in the principles and the design of the framework. So what are the takeaways? We've come a long way since the early days, the dinosaurs and the volcanoes. Toto, this doesn't look like Kansas from, the Wizard of Oz when she landed in Oz. It didn't look like Kansas, so this doesn't look like anything that you've been doing before. But it's there, and embrace it, use it, it's going to help you. Risk-based thinking without getting hurt. No one gets hurt. Environmental management system. It's now going to be connected to everything else. Business continuity, assets management, information security, health and safety. Sustainable development is actually BS 8900. ISO 2600 is social responsibility. I can put it all in there. I can now create a sustainability management system easily, very, very easily. It's all mix and match. And then finally, can't wait for the stuff to come out. I just can't wait to have this happen, and I hope you share all that with me. Here's sort of the journey you're going to go on from sort of the reform to the conforming, and then actually to perform on the other side. We do maturity plots and things like that the quality people have already done. And so I'm hoping that these slides actually are going to be available to you on the website. And we have a video of it that you'll be able to watch over and over again, I hope, every morning, And just want to end up with, sort of a plug for my course. And so that's the 13th year teaching this course. It's distance learning, open enrollment. I'll get about 200 people this year from 30 countries around the world. My Chinese students have the best attendance. They're there and they get live stream, 1 second delay. They're in the chat room. My Cambridge, Massachusetts people have the worst record. They're consultants and travel a lot. They got young children at home. They got elderly parents they're caring for. And then the book will be out at the end of March. It's Taylor and Francis, Organizational Risk Management and Sustainability, a practical step-by-step guide. I promise I'll tell everything in there. And you'll then adapt it to your use, so there'll be no things on that. And then with that, I'll take some questions.
I think we have time for a question or so.
Well, one of the things I think that if we're going to still, one of the discussion groups may be, okay, that I will come in, you can ask some questions in that time too, in the thing.
Sure. Yeah. If there's no question, I actually do have a question. It talks to the the ISO 14000. Do you think it's still relevant? My experience is people do what they're doing and then fit that into the ISO 14000 framework for an audit, and doesn't really impact the organization and how people do things. What do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, there's what I was always taught, and I trained most of the lead auditors that you see when I worked for SI Global, is that we tell the auditors to catch people doing something good, and they like to catch people doing things bad. Yeah, and it's a regulatory sort of thing. And so you catch them doing something good, and you really want them to do more good and praise them so other people do a good thing. So, and basically, it's always never done compliance, because basically all you're asking, do you know all the rules and regulations that you apply to? Show them to me. Show me how often you keep up with them. And then it's, do you have an evaluation of compliance done on a regular basis? So it's actually a really good tool when used well. With this new tool that'll be out next year, probably in the early fall, about a little earlier than this time next year, you can only use it in one way. And I think it's going to be different. That's why I said it's just so different. But there'll be people that will still not want to use it.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Thank you very much.